maybe I can do a quick intro based on some of the data samples that we've seen, like some quick notes that may be relevant to everyone. Yeah, you should be able to see my Notion now.
Yep.
Okay, so we reviewed all of the data samples that were provided in the week 2 form. And so we set up like some general notes to everyone. So we'll be sharing them right after this. But some general notes that, we found some common denominators about the data samples. So one thing is that most of the data samples they are still not fully thinking in the way that our ontology is supposed to work. So we have, that the types, properties, and the properties that those types have. Here's like an example. We have a project, topic, person, paper, let's say, and these are some of the properties that we currently have. So what we will be asking for the participants is, maybe you can see, we will send a link with all of the data types that we have and what properties we currently have for them. And participants, as they are collecting the data, they're supposed to see what kind of additional properties they would be able to fill in for those types and let us know. And then we can add those properties, or we can add those new types. But for the most data samples for now, it seems that no one, a little amount of people still think in terms of relational data, because we see just the types, and some of those types have properties, but we don't have types of entities that would be filled in those relational properties. So, so that sort of the main request there would be to start thinking how to keep your data relational. So try to avoid properties that are just have value text. Instead, we should opt in and aim for relational properties. So some examples, like we have a job listing, it's a job opening, and a property is, company name. Would be a more relational structure would be if a property would instead be a type project, which links to the company as an entity that is a type project that has that job opening. So that's like a biggest sort of thing that's
one thing just to clarify is, the assignment for last week was just for people to ingest data as is. So that's totally understandable.
Yeah, and that also we took that as a note that all of this is based on just like initial sets of data that we see. So
so it's totally fine. That's how people ingested the data, and now the next step is to think about how to map those things to individual entities.
So that's the goal of this sort of write-up that we'll be sending out, which is specifically those points of how to approach the relational data, and also just so we would together sort of sync up on what language are we using, so for the geo type specifically, as opposed to programmatic types. And so we set up some examples with some properties, and so essentially probably one of the things that we would need to get for this next week is to clearly define the types of properties that each participant wants to use for their data. And that can be sort of a back and forth. We can discuss it together, but we would need to see a good, clear initial first list of, so this is the data that I gathered, spend some time, start thinking about the ontology there, and we can take it from there. And we did organize some of the types and properties that we already seen, which people had in their data sets, and we can already start seeing some sort of common things. So a bunch of people are using roles, but just in different words. So once we'll actually be moving the content into the Geo, we're going to have to use the unified ontology. So one type that has one specific name, and it's going to be sort of a task for everyone to determine what is that one name that everyone's entities of the same kind could be using. So we'll be working on that as well. So
this is a great thing to kind of look at here. So Arturis went through based on your submissions to the week 2 form. and put in all the different types that people said they were working on. And here, and looking at the examples, you can just get an idea for where the overlap is, right? So it looks like there was the most overlap on things that were similar to roles, right? And some people had job titles. There was job openings. It's related but separate. Job opening, I think of as a separate thing, right? The job roles. Role. So nice to think about, for example, job posting and job opening, right? Those are probably the same thing, different names for the same thing.
Just the entities of job opening were in the data sample were actually job roles. They were like engineer, so but there's something to think about. Like, what does it mean when a role is a type role has an opening for it? Maybe it's it's a tag that is like open for a specific company, like so there'll be some interesting like ontology puzzles to solve with this.
Yeah, but yeah, really great to kind of see this. All right, well,
same for properties here.
Yeah, same for the properties, different types of descriptions, different types of names or titles. So yeah, these are all good things to kind of see it in one place, and we're gonna try to. So for this week, ideally, we get everybody to choose specific like property IDs and type IDs that they want to use for their things, and we make sure that we kind of converge. So that would be a good goal. Okay, let's see if people can speak now. Why don't you post in the chat if you would like to demo?
Okay, looks like I can.
There we go.
All right. Well, I didn't do like a lot, but I was able to create some entities, which I think is kind of cool. So if it's okay, I'll share my screen.
Please.
Okay, well, I was able to create a space just to deploy everything. And I focus on creating some academic fields because I will be working with the papers, and the idea is to link the papers to academic fields. So I was just using the academic field type, which already exists, and I've been creating a bunch of it. So like economics, or I don't know, these other ones, physics. One small issue I had was that I created some duplicates trying to test something. That then I was asking how to remove these duplicates. So I just did a code to remove every relation and attribute from that academic field. So that did the job, I think. And the idea is to have a script that creates all my fields that I already have in a database, and then associate its entity ID so I don't have duplicates. And also I'm trying to do this so it works with testnet and mainnet. So whenever this is ready, I can just go and run this again, but against mainnet. So in this case, to create this academic field, the idea is just to create two operations. One to create like the entity with the name, and then add the relationship to the academic field type, and that will be all. I think this is kind of one of the more atomic things we can do, but well, I think it's some good first steps.
Amazing. Yeah, agreed. And so far, you feel like you have a good sense then for how to add the different properties that you would want to add?
I think I do, but this is like just two operations to have just one of the properties or types. So I think when I come to the paper, I will have to put some mind on it to have everything right. So it doesn't seem so straightforward, but I think I can do it.
Yeah, I think this is where we'll want to have kind of some of the utilities, right? So you could have if you have a bunch of different properties on an entity, it's easier to have a single function call where you can just kind of
Yeah,
have
that's
your
right.
objects, right? That's kind of what you would want.
But otherwise, I think we are okay with this. I don't know. My idea is to go from the, I don't know how to say it, from the things that will be related to, for example, starting with academic fields to create the ArcSI project. So, I mean, first create everything that will be have a relationship to, and then start creating everything that will be related to that other things.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that will be nice to have, that you say you are already working on that, it's to have all the entities or attributes or types actually that will be reused with someone else. So I mean, so we don't create any duplicate, but just that. Well, I in my case, I created like a service, just a file to make this code to create the operation, relations, remove, all that. It's not that different than just using this, but with some structure. I'm working with like a global space that I'm setting in my. I'm using a burner for this, so this is an issue. But the idea is to work with a global space that I can, well, just reuse for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I saw that some people were having kind of issue with this operation, so I have the code published. So in case anyone finds this useful, they can contact me and try to explain what I'm trying to do.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the open source contribution.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Who wants to go next?
Yes, first I start with job. I do data for job opening. Yes, it's mine. And here is my Neo4j database. I don't do it. I don't be here in previous because I was a bit busy. But here is my small my table. Here is I create. Oh, sorry. I get 6,000 notices. I get only 3 sites now, but I work on it, and I think it will be better and better. I tried yesterday. I recreate my data because I feel better understanding with types, which types will be better, and rework a bit my code. Also, I created a small configuration for my parser. It will be better for use, I think. It's easier to understand. And also, here is my parser data, which I parse from 3 sites. And also, I started work with add my space and add types with it. I understand that maybe a bit not so much, but I will do it after on weekends. Yes, because only start this, understand how to add types, how work with it, and I think maybe on Saturday it will be more, and I create ordering for communicate for get data from my database and creating Geo browser. I think it will be interesting for me. It's really interesting for me. And also I add here new tab for add information, like add space, add other things, and get data from it. I think that it from my site, and I work on it now.
Cool. Yeah, this looks like some great tooling.
Yes, I try to do best.
Yeah, and yeah, the web scraping for crypto jobs. I think that's going to be really amazing content to have. So, well, yeah, excited to get you with some good tools so that you can publish that data over to the knowledge graph. So, all right, who wants to go next? Feel free to. Awesome, yeah, Dennis, you want to go?
Yeah, I'm building out this web scraper for jobs in the Bay Area, and I'll just show you kind of an example here how it works. So I'm using Glassdoor right now. I'll actually stop it, but it's scraping jobs from the Glassdoor website, and it kind of goes in a few stages here. So first we get job titles, and this is just from like the autocomplete API that they have. So you input like a couple characters to begin with. In this case, I input like the first letter, so like ETS, and then after that, the autocomplete API will get the actual jobs, like the job titles, and then based on that, we can continue the scraping. So after it gets the job titles, since I'm also scraping jobs in SF specifically, like local jobs, I also need to get like location information because Glassdoor has the system where you need to get like the location ID, and you need to actually get that. So that's why we call this endpoint, which gets the ID of like San Francisco, for example, here, or like San Jose. And then after that, it scrapes actual jobs based on those job titles and based on the location. So it goes by each job title and by each like location that we have input. So here it's just San Francisco and San Jose. And then it gets all the jobs for that. And I've been mostly working out and building out the actual like technical aspects of the scraper. I haven't published anything on the testnet yet. But the data, the data itself is looking pretty good right now. Since I've been able to kind of get around most of the anti-bot measures that Glassdoor has. So I can actually show like a CSV that I have of the jobs. So can you see this?
Yep.
So this right here has about like 1,500 jobs. That's kind of my test run. And for each job, we have like a title, company, logo, rating, which you can get from Glassdoor as well, location, salary information, description, and then skills, which is all taken from the Glassdoor posting. And then other attributes, which fall into like, benefits, for instance, or like work schedule types. And then this can like also further be categorized. And then finally the job link. So I think this is pretty like ready, in terms of like I have the properties down and I have the objects down. It's just one object per line. And then the properties are consistent. So I think next I would need to work on actually getting this data onto the testnet. And also in terms of the companies, I need to do the relational, like the relational properties as well. Since right now this is only like a text field for the company name, though based on the companies that are listed here, I could just write another script that finds all the common companies and makes entities out of that. And then, fills it in with like the company logo and other information that I can get from Glassdoor, like the rating too.
Yeah, this is looking great. It's awesome that it's already have all these jobs here. So, one question that I have on some of the tooling side is, we'll probably need some kind of tools to, well, right now I know our search isn't as ideal as we would want because we need fuzzy search. But I guess for this sort of a thing, if you had a company, you would want to first see if the company exists in the knowledge graph, right? And if so, use the existing ID, otherwise create it. I am a little bit concerned that with this many, for example, companies here, I happen to know none of these are really in the knowledge graph yet because we've been focusing mostly on crypto projects. But you would want something that was pretty reliable to kind of search, do a fuzzy, and have a high degree of confidence that either you get a good match or you don't. And either way, we need to kind of automate essentially what that threshold is of probably considering a good match, because you want to automate this, right? For users who are in there, you search for something and you can see a bunch of things, and then you can kind of pick the right one. And here we need that to be automated. So to be able to do this well, we just need that confidence to be pretty high. Interesting things for us to look at. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it could also be useful if we could just have also a search just based on the actual properties, because for instance, like the company here, like the name is going to be pretty much the same as in, the corresponding like geo entity. So if we could also query entities by property, like across type, that would be pretty cool too.
Yeah, definitely. So we do have, actually, wait, if you can just share one for a second, we do have that knowledge graph data service, I believe, has fuzzy search already. And we're going to have that available. People could start playing with it actually potentially as soon as this week. So maybe for this type of a use case, maybe we'll have people use this other API, the new one that we're working on, just for fuzzy search, and maybe people can try to figure out how well you can get the automated, find or create working. One thing I would just notice is I think we do still want to clean these up a little bit, and we should have some maybe some conventions around names. Arturos, maybe this is something you could post out in the Discord. What some conventions should be around names. So, for example, we don't want, I think, the LLC or the Inc. I'm seeing some of these are these slashes. Except for rare exceptions, I think we want to use name casing for things like companies and title casing for everything else. So, these things that are kind of all caps, those should be, with name casing. Off the top of my head, maybe some things we could clean up.
Yeah, these are the names as they're coming from Glassdoor directly. So the Inc. and LLC, that's how it shows on Glassdoor. And also like the backslashes, that's just like to escape commas because some of the items have commas in it.
Yeah, so whatever point in the pipeline we do that cleanup, let's just try to get that stage in before publishing.
Great,
yeah, this is looking great. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Who wants to go next? There was a question from Lewis about, do we want to make a relation with Web 2 things? So, for example, the Glassdoor link. So what we have is, in general, we don't really link much to Web 2 things. We want to have as many of the entities living natively on the knowledge graph. There are, for certain things, we do include a web URL. So I think that's fair. That's the property name that we give it. It's called web URL. And so certain things like a job opening, right? Or, it would make sense to have that property that links out, but ideally, also we do want to have attribution. So like for articles, we do the same thing. We always link to the web URL of the article. So you can see the original, even if we have, a native version on the knowledge graph. Yeah, so a question about, TTL or cron jobbing to make sure that the link property is still active. So I think, that is something that is basically up to the space. So it's the job of the editors to own the quality of their spaces. And I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see how do people assign work out to try to make sure that they have quality, accurate information in their spaces. And, eventually we're going to want to have incentives that are built into this so people can get paid to do this kind of work. Right? But it's an interesting question, right? So there are certain types of things that need to be updated frequently. And job openings are probably in that kind of category, that you don't want to have a job opening that's out of date. Now, eventually, we would want people to actually use, the knowledge graph as their primary system of record, right? Maybe you don't even use Glassdoor or, other kind of websites like that. If you can just publish on a knowledge graph, have it syndicated to lots of different applications, and it's a better experience. But until that happens, and we are doing this web scraping, it's going to depend on, the different types of things, how often you want to scrape and how live you can make that. I do agree for something like job openings, it's an open question. Maybe once a day is enough. Maybe you want to check some things more frequently than that. So I think, maybe we can focus a little bit on jobs since that's where we were. Now, then maybe we go to academic fields. Looks like there's some people working on interesting things with academic fields. Specifically, seeing a bunch of people pulling in research papers, which is really interesting. So maybe we could look at that and then do regions last. We do have Pheramo here in the chat. Would like to share. Let's see if Kevin can grant access. Once you get access, I think you have to leave the voice chat and then come back in.
Yeah, so if we go a bit deeper, so into the ontology, so for us to solve the ontology issues based on all of the samples that we see in, and the general approach is, so we one of the questions in the forum was define your types. So and we noticed some people understood that question a bit differently. So in terms of getting the data into Geo, so it's a specific conversation that we're having here is the geotypes and their properties, which is to say specific types that just define your data, your data points. So these examples, like they sort of show like a good general overview of like what we're dealing with. The fact that if you're scraping data and the data, when it's scraped, it might already have a certain type, as defined by the source. But it's a Web2 world, and nothing is really interconnected and semantic in that way. So different sources can mention or reference the same things with different terms. That's going to be a challenge number one. For everyone to we will have a one specific list of types and properties. And then essentially, yeah.
So let's go into some specifics. So let's look at, we had the question of job openings. Do you have an example? I think we do have some already also on Geo. You can go to Geo and you can search for job opening. And let's see if we think it generally aligns with people. Because one thing that kind of comes up, right, is there's a few different things that can mean similar things. So I think one thing that we have here is, right, basically the role. The way that we use the word role is, right, it is the thing like software engineer. Now, someone was asking in the Discord earlier, what about like seniority titles? So you could have a senior software engineer, for example. I think that makes sense to have as separate roles. So each name like that, right, the abstract one, not at a specific company, but just, for example, senior software engineer, I think that makes sense to have as a role. Then we have a job opening, and a job opening, right, I guess one interesting thing that we could debate about, this particular type is whether you would want to have something, which right now I don't actually see we have like a status, right? This becomes an interesting thing where you could have a job opening that has a status, like if it's been filled or something like that, or you could just kind of delete the job opening maybe once it's been filled. So it could be that a job opening is something that only exists while it's available, or I think it makes sense to not delete it, to have it still open, and to potentially just have like a status or something. Does anybody have thoughts about that? Oh, I do have chats here. So, right, senior 1, soft engineer 2. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. So, yeah, you could have levels, That could be something like a level, could be a property of a role, right? So that if you had senior software engineer, you could have levels. Now this becomes an interesting thing where, right, you could have different views on what those levels are, right? So maybe it's nice to try to get some standardization, right, across different companies. People could roughly agree, hey, level 3 means this at different companies. But maybe a company decides that for them, they treat it differently. They think an entry level is a level 0 or something like that. So that becomes a multi-space entity thing where, right, different companies or different spaces could have their own views on the same properties, but that could be added. Cool. So that's kind of the job opening. Then, if we look closer, right, we have this employment type thing. So we could come up with what are the different employment types? You know, full time, part time, things like that. If you go back, right, the skills, we saw Dennis showed examples of some skills. So those could all be individual entities, right? And then you'd have relations to them. Team, I think could kind of be optional, right? And it's sometimes companies, you know, will say, okay, this is part of the design team. Maybe they'll even, right, have a, like, maybe that team has a manager and you want to know who's the manager for this team that I would be joining. So that's something that you could kind of define semantically this way. The location, ideally, that points to an entity ID, a region ID. We still have to get the regions in, and we haven't, I don't think we've started bulk importing all the regions yet. So that's something we might need to find a new owner for that, because I'm not sure if the person that we thought might work on that has been participating at a high level. So we might need to find an owner for pulling in all the different regions. So keep you posted on that. Okay, here we have team lead, which could make sense at this top level, or it could be, right, something that's under the team. So you could do that either way. I could see a case for removing team lead from the job opening and having it just be on the team itself. And then we have some related spaces, and then the project, right? So the project being the company or whatever. So for the folks that are working on, it looks like there's a few people, Dennis and Ilya, working on the job stuff. So how does this rough model fit? Do you feel like these properties map pretty closely to what you guys had? I know there were some things missing. There was like salary, equity, those things could be added.
Also, what would be the value type of salary? It's probably just text.
Salary, it's an interesting thing because you need to kind of do formatting on it. I think it's better if it's number. And so
Ideally, yes. Especially if we want to like group on or like organize the jobs by salary. But the issue is that it's not just one number. A salary is usually a range from a number to a number.
That's right. Yeah. So it could be two fields, right? It could be salary, like start and end. With time we have start and end, or maybe there's another pattern that we use for different ranges. Max, min, max. Yeah, those could be good words. Okay, so why don't we take a stab at updating some of the properties? I think the best way is to probably use the Geo mainnet as a source of truth for these conversations. We'll take a stab at updating these, and then we'll post in the Discord, and you could take a look and provide feedback, and we'll do some rounds and hopefully get to a good set of standardized properties. Yeah. So I see the point here from Lewis about using archived as a property. That's definitely something we could use. Yeah. So I guess the thing with archived is it's kind of binary, and there is use to that. It's a good option, or there could be a status.
Sorry, I have a question about source for location, because I use it for parse data. Like I use URL from location for a parcel. If I have it and I have stub, if stub is changed and something happened, I need to add source to Web3. It will be normal from where I get it. Not.
A source as in like a web URL?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's really important thing for understand have I this location as it opening or it finished or achieved, and if it achieved, I can delete it or delete it from web, delete relationships in Web3.
That makes sense. Wait, so there might have been a few things there. One is you would like to add like a source, essentially a web URL to the job opening. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
And then, yeah, there was just a question of the status. So yeah, let us. And there's a point here. Is that the editor role as far as who can? Not sure if I caught that part, but sorry. Did that answer your point?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, one more question additional about we have two people who work on job opening and we will now add new properties for job opening. Maybe we can collaborate with somebody to create a list because it will be on one wave on it. Because now I will add new job opening property and maybe other adds and it will be the same.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, that is a little bit where kind of the governance usually happens, and we want to improve the tooling around that so people can kind of propose changes and maybe even have discussion. We don't have those advanced features yet. And so right now, what I would say is use the Discord. It seems that you and Dennis are the two that right now are working on job openings. I don't know if anybody else on this call is as well, but I would say there's two more. Well, yeah, Louis. So, what I would say is use the Discord. I think Discord's great because it's good for people to also see the conversations and see how you're thinking about it, and then they could have similar conversations in their domain. You could share a Google Doc or something with each other if you want. But then we'll use this here as a source of truth, if that makes sense. So we'll take that conversation to Discord. Let's take a look at some of the others. So now that people have had a chance to dive in, we have the paper type is in the education space. Byron, do you know right now, did we end up migrating over the root space from mainnet to the testnet?
Yes.
I think we may want to do the same thing with the education space because I think there's a bunch of properties that we added to the education space or type of properties.
Okay.
Potentially. So let us do that so that folks that are working on the education stuff can publish there. I think somebody had mentioned, maybe Santiago, that he had published an academic field. Okay, so coming back here, so the academic fields, you can see my screen, right? So this is in the geospace, which is why if you publish, you try to create something with this type, you'll see it on the testnet. If you try to find type IDs or property IDs that you see on the mainnet, and then you link to them, you publish to the testnet, and they don't resolve, it's probably because those entities don't exist on the testnet. So let us know in the chat, and we can migrate more of these things over from the mainnet to the testnet so you have what you need over there as you're publishing.
If you try and publish something referencing an entity that doesn't exist yet, then that data just won't get indexed at all. You just skip it.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be an explanation if you try to publish something and it doesn't show up. That's why. That's if it has a type that it doesn't resolve.
If it has a relation pointing to something that doesn't exist, it just won't index that relation.
It won't index
It's true
that.
for like, it's true for triples as well. So say you give it an attribute that doesn't exist in the system, unless that attribute is in the edit, the same edit as the triple you're creating, it will also just skip indexing that edit, that triple, because the attribute doesn't exist.
Got it. Okay, that's probably good for people to know.
Yep.
Okay, so this is, I was showing this at the previous kickoff, an example of a paper, right, that has a published in, it has related spaces. It doesn't have topics per se, so this is the sort of thing that we could kind of, right, discuss properties that we want to add to papers. Does anybody have, we're going to go through this process. We're going to suggest some edits, and we'll go through and we'll update it here, and then we'll share it, let's say kind of by end of week. But right, if we want to have things like topics, we could add those to the properties for example, papers. So we're going through, it's a lot to kind of dig through the week 2 submissions, but we're going to try to give some suggestions based on the data that we see people are pulling in and try to get these standardized.
Just quick note on the standardization. So in the same way that multiple people are using maybe some types, the same types but with different names, same can happen for properties. So for example, I see published in. For article, for example, we have a property that's a publisher, and I think it serves exactly the same function. So that's another maybe thing to merge these two properties.
Yeah, that makes sense. So somebody was just asking, like, right, where would they find this? It's a combination of browsing and searching, right? So if we're doing something related to education, you might come to education, and you can click on the ontology tab, and you'll see, types and the related properties if those blocks were added. Not all of the ontology tabs are necessarily filled out, but you can see many of the spaces have ontology tabs, and many of them have types and related properties that were added. And then for the root space, right, just from the root, you do the same thing, and these are the top level types. So you can see the properties here. Here we also created a table of properties. Not all the ontology tabs have that, but this is a good place to kind of see what properties and types already exist, and then you can also search, right? So if I'm looking for a journal, is there something like a journal? I can see here, in this case, I'm looking, this is showing me a journal type, right? You can see the types of the thing here. You can see it's a type in the education space. I could click on that, see more about that. So that's how you can browse the existing graph on mainnet and see what's already there. So off to a great start. It's great to see people publishing knowledge to the testnet. Keep it up. We'll work on getting that round of utils for you hopefully soon. We'll also send over the knowledge graph data service that you can use for, I think, fuzzy search. So we'll send updates about that. Otherwise, really excited to see everyone get to publish this week. So hopefully the goal for this week is, even if you can just publish a single entity of each type that you want to be organizing, I think that's a great first step, because then we can iterate on the structure, right? Before you publish 1,000 entities, better to even just have one that you think has the right structure that you want. We'll get feedback on it, make sure we're using the right property IDs, the right type IDs, and that everything is formatted well. And then next week we'll ramp that up and get even more published. All right, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you joining today. It's great to see everyone. Have a really great week, and don't hesitate to ask any questions in the Discord. We'll be around. We're here to help you. All right. Thanks, everyone.